Can I just ask you a few questions? The
Yes.
first is in respect of your feeling bullied, is how you put it, as a result of which you gave up something which you found fulfilling, working for people that you valued working for
Yes.
about 15, 16 years.
Yes.
Yeah. Who in particular would you say was making you feel that way?
The chief executive at the time.
Martin Harvey.
Yes.
And what was it, do you think, that he was doing that made you feel that way?
As I said, I felt he wasn't supporting my work. I was receiving constant emails criticising my work, asking me why I was doing whatever I was doing when I'd been doing that for the previous 15 or 16 years. It just was uncomfortable to work in that sort of environment.
Did you ever have it out with him?
Yeah, I think I must have made it known at the time that I was unhappy, but nothing changed. I did on a number of occasions I spoke to Peter. I actually invited Peter Stevens down to my house when I was living in Hazelmere to express my unhappiness about the way the registrants were treated. So I think that would have given some idea that I was unhappy with what was going on.
Now he chose to ask you to help him at the Eileen Trust.
Yes, to be fair to him, he later apologised to me and said that I was right on a lot of things that I said at the time, but I'd already left the Macfarlane Trust by then and just continued with the Eileen Trust.
So if he was apologising to you later and recognising that you were right as he saw it then, does that mean that he did nothing at the time, or how did he respond at the time when you brought him down to Hazelmere?
He didn't do anything at the time. I'm sure people must have known what was happening. I'm afraid when you put your head above the parapet and criticise. Well, I don't think it was criticism. Probably they saw it as criticism, but it was things that I felt weren't working properly. You're usually in a minority of one, in my experience.
And did you feel that any of the, no names please, but any of the user trustees gave you any assistance or support?
No, although I did get a lot of support from the registrants, and when I did leave, as I said earlier, some of them did mount a little campaign to see, whether I could go back. I've had all the way through from the time I started working for the trust to today, total support from the registrants. A great kindness shown to me from them, which I really value.
Now, the next question, in a sense, it's linked, but only tangentially. What personal characteristics and experience do you think would best equip or best have equipped individuals to become trustees of the Macfarlane Trust? You might want to separate that up into what personal characteristics or approach would best suit, and then what experience might best suit.
I think some form of role in a caring environment, or mixing with people who were basically poor and weren't middle class, well off people with very good careers who couldn't really, maybe I'm being unfair, I'm sure some of them did try to understand the beneficiaries, but I think a lot of them didn't. I think it was very difficult for them to understand as I said earlier, you know, the difficulties faced by people who are ill and poor and, you know, and had a setback. And that one setback leads to a whole trigger of other events going on, in my experience, not just with Macfarlane Trust and Eileen Trust beneficiaries, just with people who I meet in my everyday work who don't have that much money.
So the personal characteristics you're identifying is a compassionate approach,
Yes.
a willingness to understand, or an actual understanding,
Yes.
at least a willingness, and a willingness and desire to mix with the people who are looking for assistance in order to understand them better and know who they're helping.
Definitely. I don't see how you can actually help people if you can't empathise with them. And that goes for whatever job you're doing.
And what sort of experience, obviously part of the experience that may go into being a trustee may be the sort of experience that gives rise to the characteristics you've identified. But what sort of experience?
Well, that's the difficult one, isn't it? Because trustees have to be people who have got the time. They've all had good careers. A lot of people were obviously in finance or in the law or what. I'm not sure what other people did, and I suppose the two aren't necessarily compatible. To have I'm not saying they're not. Some people do those jobs and are very caring, but others aren't, because they don't really see people who are out of their social structure. So I hope I'm explaining myself. It's quite difficult.
I think completely. Even though you may be saying that all lawyers are really socially remote, but there we are.
Yeah, no,
you may be right. That's for others to comment.
I'm sure, like in every walk of life, there are people who are kind and compassionate, but I think if you're always mixing in a particular circle and a particular social group, you don't understand the needs of people who are poor, basically.
And what made things so much better at the Eileen Trust? Now, leave aside the question of the size, which obviously had something to do with getting to know the beneficiaries rather better. But what else do you think assisted?
Well, I suppose by that time I'd been working with the organisations for about 15 years, so maybe I was more experienced in what I was doing. The Eileen Trust beneficiaries, a lot of them had perfectly normal jobs and careers until this one event. You know, they'd just been unfortunate enough to go into hospital and have a blood transfusion, so they hadn't had the previous problems that the haemophilia community had in usually having health issues and things that prevented them from working.
Yes.
So yes, but there were people in the Eileen Trust, you know, there were lots of people who had leukemia in childhood and had contracted HIV as part of the treatment. So there were people with health issues, secondary health issues. In fact, most people had them. They were just different health issues to those of the Macfarlane Trust.
Yes, and there'd be a variety of different people without the commonality of background of having had haemophilia. Yes,
there were. And that was another interesting point, because I think it was actually one of the registrants of the Eileen Trust who was very keen on the Eileen Trust having weekends. And I think at first the trustees were a bit against it, but we pressed. And one of the things they said, but these people are going to have absolutely nothing in common because they're from all different walks of life. And what was one of the best things about the Eileen Trust weekends was just the way that these people loved being together. They felt relaxed, that they didn't have to worry about anyone else finding out what was wrong with them. They had a common thing one thing that had happened to them, which they all had in common, and they could all relate to. And it was just lovely to see them all together. And I think they got a lot out of it. Oh, I know they did. I know they did, because they all said how much they enjoyed the weekends. And I must say, and, you know, I have been quite critical of some of the trustees, but I'd like to say in this case, they did a fantastic job. As I said, Peter Stevens always went for the whole weekend. He was very good. We had a trustees session. The other trustees used to come for part of it. They all sat down and listened to the views of the registrants. It was a really excellent weekend, and I think we all got a lot out of it, trustees, myself, as well as the registrants.
So at least the trustees of the Eileen Trust were indicating by what they did that they were prepared to mix and to talk and try to understand the needs of those who were beneficiaries. Were they collectively and perhaps individually more empathetic and caring than you saw the trustees of the Macfarlane Trust becoming?
Well, some of them were trustees of the Macfarlane Trust as well. I think they just took a much more relaxed view with the Eileen Trust for some reason. I think that's for them to say why they felt that way, but yes.
And there's only one other question, which is quite different, really out of curiosity. Did you actually end up giving evidence in the hepatitis litigation?
Yes, I did.
And when you were giving evidence, was your evidence challenged?
Yes, it was. It was challenged, and I don't think the judge at the time took it. I don't think he believed me just how impossible it was to get life assurance for people who were co-infected. But I can assure you that's the case, and that's what I've dealt with for years.
I have no difficulty in reaching that conclusion. Don't worry about that. Well, thank you very much.
May I say one other thing?
Yeah, but you're running ahead of us, because what you'll find is the choreography is that Miss Scott will now ask you if you've anything more you'd like to say.
Okay, sorry.
So that's what she's going to do. But don't spoil her moment.
So is there anything you would like to add to your evidence?
Yes, I'm probably repeating things that I've said before. But I'd like to say the charities were in an impossible situation. What should have happened at the time of this scandal, the government should have held their hands up and said, we've made a mistake and we will compensate these people properly. There should have also been an insurance-backed scheme so that widows who were left didn't have to worry about mortgages. Just to demonstrate that point, I'm helping someone at the moment who's an interest-only mortgage. She's a widow. She's in her 70s. The mortgage has come to the end of its term. It's interest-only. And I've been negotiating with HSBC for the last 5 years to actually keep her in her house. She shouldn't be in that position. She should have had a lump sum payment that enabled her to pay it off years ago. I think.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I can see it pretty well. I think why Tudor Williams approached you as he did to act for the Macfarlane Trust, and I think I can understand fully why Peter Stevens asked you to go and join the Eileen Trust.
Thank you.
You've given evidence, even though it goes back for 30 years, with a definite and clear recollection. You've given it in a way which I have to say I regard as not only clear but also straightforward, compassionate and empathetic. And I'd like to thank you very much for your insight. You haven't held back, but you put it in an understanding way, I think. So thank you for all that.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. Thank you.